There's a lot of talk these days about the new evangelization. We hear about the synod of bishops that's gathering to talk about the new evangelization. There's a new commission in Rome that the Holy Father has gathered from experts around the world to study the new evangelization. We see posters for talks on the new evangelization in our parishes. What is this new evangelization? Well, to understand it, we first have to understand what evangelization is. Evangelization, very simply, is sharing the gospel in such a way that it evokes a positive response. This is the fundamental call of the Catholic Church. But John Paul II, in 1983, began to speak about a new evangelization. And so many people ask, well, in what sense is it new? Is there an old evangelization? Is it different from missionary work? What exactly does it mean? John Paul wrote a document in 1990 called Redemptoris Missio, or in English, Mission of the Redeemer. And in it, he spoke extensively about evangelization, and he spoke specifically about this new evangelization and what he meant by it. This is what he said. He said, first, there is a situation which the Church's missionary activity addresses, peoples, groups, and sociocultural contexts in which Christ and his gospel are not known, or which lack Christian communities sufficiently mature to be able to incarnate the faith in their own environment and proclaim it to other groups. This is the mission ad gentes in the proper sense of the word. What he means is that there are groups of people that don't have Christian faith, nations, regions, continents even, that haven't heard the saving message of Christ. And what we need to do is bring the gospel to them. The words ad gentes just mean to the nations or to the peoples. And this is what we think of when we think of traditional missionary work. Christian groups, peoples, nations, bringing the good news of Jesus Christ to non-Christian people, groups, or nations. And he says we still have to do this. This is evangelization. But he says there's a second group. He says there are Christian communities with adequate and solid ecclesial structures. They are fervent in their faith and in Christian living. They bear witness to the gospel in their surroundings, and they have a sense of commitment to the universal mission of the Church. In these communities, the Church carries out her activity and pastoral care. He says the Church can't neglect people that are Christian. The Church needs to provide the sacraments. The Church needs to provide formation and discipleship and community for these people. And so he calls this pastoral care. Now this would seem to exhaust the possibilities. There are the non-Christians towards which the mission ad gentes is directed, and there are Christians towards which pastoral care is directed. And we've often seen the world through this lens: pastoral care and the mission ad gentes, Christians and non-Christians. But he says something really neat. He says there's actually a third group. This is what he says. He says there's an intermediate situation, particularly in countries with ancient Christian roots, and occasionally in younger churches as well, where entire groups of the baptized have lost a living sense of the faith, or no longer consider themselves to be Catholic, or live a life far removed from the gospel and from Christ. He says in these cases what we need is a new evangelization or a re-evangelization. And so what is this new evangelization? It is the re-evangelization of the baptized. It almost sounds contradictory. We sometimes assume if somebody is baptized that they are evangelized. And John Paul II says, no, that should be the case, but unfortunately it's not. There are many baptized people who aren't evangelized. And he gives 3 different ways in which we can understand this. I'd like to see if he's right. The first group, he says, are those that are baptized but have lost a living sense of the faith. If we set as a minimum standard for having a sense of faith, being that a person goes to Mass on the weekend. Because if people don't go to Mass, they're probably not praying seriously, they're probably not seeking after holiness, they're probably not following the teachings of the Church. So if people aren't going to Mass, they probably have lost a living sense of the faith. In France, less than 7% of baptized Catholics go to Mass on the weekend. In Canada, less than 20%. That means that on any given Sunday morning, out of 15 people in France that wake up, only 1 will go to Mass. 15 baptized Catholics. In Canada, out of every 5 baptized Catholics that get up on a Sunday morning, 1, less than 1 on average, will go to Mass? Is it true that in our country, a country with ancient Christian roots, there are many, many Catholics that have lost a living sense of the faith? Absolutely. He also says that there is a second criteria. There are Catholics who no longer consider themselves to be members of the Church. As I travel across this country and across North America, and I speak with Catholics, and I ask them about their family members, almost every single Catholic that I have met has members of their family that have left the Church. They've become Protestant, Baptist, Pentecostal, or they've lost Christian faith altogether and they've become agnostic or even atheist, or they participate in New Age activities. Everywhere I go, these are the people that I meet. And so I think it's true that there's a large percentage of baptized Catholics who today have wandered entirely from the Church and no longer even identify themselves as Catholics. And then he says there's this third group, those who identify themselves as Catholics but live a life far removed from the gospel. I think we see this in our society today. We see Catholics who are supporting many of the components of the culture of death. We see Catholics who, while they receive the sacraments of initiation, while they may have received a Catholic education, nothing in their life testifies to the fact that they have Christian faith. And so this broke the heart of our late Holy Father, as it ought to break our heart. And he says what we need to do is we need to re-evangelize these people. We can't forget about non-Christian countries and nations and peoples, but we also can't forget our neighbor next door, who may have been raised a Catholic, who may have received a Catholic education, but today does not have that beautiful treasure of Christian faith. To them, we need to bring a re-evangelization. To them, we need the new for them, we need the new evangelization.